All right, well, I am going to get us started today. Good afternoon, Mavericks, and everyone else who's joining us and continue to join us. Welcome to our fourth UNO Young Alumni Professional Series webinar. My name is Anthony Flott, and I am Interim Executive Director of the UNO Alumni Association. Two quick notes before we get started. First of all visitors today do not show up on anyone's Zoom screen, so take comfort in knowing you're not visible to the world. And secondly, I will share my screen here. There we are. If anyone is interested in attendance this afternoon, would like us to send them a free UNO alumni pin like you see here, please just reply to the email you received from us confirming your registration for this webinar, and we will mail that your way soon. Okay, with that, today it is my pleasure to welcome Rebecca Atkins, a career advisor in the College of Business Administration's Career Development Office. Rebecca also is 2021 chair of the Greater Omaha Chamber's Young Professionals Council. Today, Rebecca will speak with us about how community involvement can foster career networking, which is a great topic for so many Mavericks, given how many of us have had community service emphasized during our time as students, especially with 7 days of service. And that's something that the Alumni Association is really trying to foster each year through our monthly alumni month of service. With that, Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you all today. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. Okay, so as Anthony mentioned, today I'm going to be talking about community involvement as a networking tool. Again, my name is Rebecca Atkins. I use the pronouns she, hers, and I'm a career advisor here at UNO in the College of Business. So I want to start this presentation off by telling you all a story. Ever since I was little, I wanted to be a veterinarian. Obviously, that is not what I'm doing now, and I'm going to explain why. So in high school, I pursued my passion of working with animals by working part-time at a veterinary clinic. Right, I really love dogs and cats, and so I was very lucky to get in with a veterinary clinic and work with a vet who kind of showed me the ropes. And so I continued to pursue that passion in college. I went to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Yes, I know, I'm not a UNO alum. I went to our sister institution down the road in Lincoln. And again, I studied veterinary medicine there. Throughout college, I really continued to work at the vet clinic, as well as was a campus ambassador for the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I'll touch on why that's important later on. But about my junior year, halfway through my junior year, I was going to a friend's house. First time I had been to her house in Lincoln, and she had cats. You know, I thought no big deal. I love dogs and cats, and so we went, and about 10 minutes into the visit, my throat closed up, my eyes got really red, and that was the first time I realized that I had developed a cat allergy. Clearly not ideal for someone who is studying to become a veterinarian, right? Until then, I didn't know that people could develop allergies. So for all of you out there, yes, you can develop allergies throughout your life. And I also thought that I was the only one in my family that didn't have this cat allergy for a reason, right? It just further ingrained that this was my purpose to be a vet, because I was the only one that didn't have this allergy. So after this discovery, I was obviously a little bit upset. And I had, you know, a few options. I could work with farm animals instead, which really wasn't up my alley. I could continue to pursue veterinary school and give myself an allergy shot every day and, you know, kind of just tough it out and continue to work with animals. I could change my major and pursue something else, but that really didn't sound great either. As I mentioned, I was a junior, so I was almost done with school. I was also on an academic scholarship, and so that scholarship would run out after 4 years. And so I didn't have much time to pursue another career path, another major. So I did what any really good prepared college student would do, and I just continued pursuing that degree. I loved the sciences, and I said, it'll work itself out. I'll figure it out when I'm about to graduate. Definitely not the career advice I would give any student today. But I will never forget, it was my senior year. I was studying for finals in the student union, so it had to have been late April, early May. And the director of admissions at the University of Lincoln gave me a phone call. I didn't know her at the time, but again, I had worked as a campus ambassador throughout my time in undergrad, which was a program under the admissions office. So campus ambassadors gave campus tours to prospective students. They worked at recruitment events, that sort of thing. So she gave me a call, introduced herself, and asked me if I had ever thought about becoming an admissions counselor. Of course, I had not ever thought about becoming an admissions counselor, but again, I was familiar with the office. I kind of knew what admissions counselors did because I had worked with them through my time as a campus ambassador. And she said that, I had been referred to her by a couple of her staff when she put the call out for admissions counselors that they were hiring for the next year. And she asked if I wanted a job. Again, this is college Rebecca who had no plan as she was about to graduate. And so I said, sure, and she hired me on the spot. I didn't even have to interview for the position, which is extremely rare, I would say. And that's actually how I got my start into higher education. I worked as an admissions counselor for 2 years at UNL, then decided it was time to move home. I was ready to be back in Omaha. And so when I moved back, I got a position at Bellevue University as an academic advisor. And then I wanted to be back in public education. So after I got my master's at Bellevue, I applied for a position at UNO, and I was an academic and career advisor. And then now, again, strictly, I do career advising in the College of Business. So one thing I just like to point out about my story is that, it was a real life example of, it's not what I knew or who I knew, but it was really who knew me. My veterinary science degree had absolutely nothing to do with being an admissions counselor, which I just have to ask real quick, and feel free to throw it in the chat. Is there anyone else out there who is not working in the field that they studied? It's kind of a running joke amongst higher ed professionals. None of us, grew up wanting or dreaming to be in higher ed. We all just kind of landed here. So I love to hear stories about, other people's backgrounds and if they're still working in the field. So feel free to throw those in the chat. I think that's kind of fun. Anyway, back to the story. I really got my first professional position because of people that knew me, right? So I knew the admissions staff. I had worked under them as a campus ambassador, not much, right? I gave tours, so it wasn't a whole lot of personal connection, but I knew them, but not well enough to kind of seek them out and ask for a job. But they felt comfortable referring me to the director. And again, and that's kind of how I got my first position. So it really was about who knew me. Now, I like to also point out that the referral, of course, I pride myself on doing good work. I know I gave great campus tours when I was an ambassador. But when I, reached back out and talked to the admissions staff that referred me, I asked why, and they said, well, you showed up. You really showed up. You did the work. And I just like to joke that the campus tours were usually around 10 a.m. on Friday. And I don't know about you all in college, but in Lincoln, we had this thing called Thirsty Thursdays. And so a lot of the student ambassadors, I think on Friday mornings, just couldn't make it to the tours. So I do pride myself on showing up. And, I am proud of that they knew me well enough and they knew my work ethic and where I came from and were comfortable making that referral. So focusing on, networking and community involvement today, I just have to point out that approximately 50 to 80% of jobs today are landed purely from networking and referrals. Deloitte actually did a study not too long ago and found that most employers would actually prefer not to list their positions publicly, and if they could, would work purely off of referrals. So this, concept of networking and really expanding your social capital is more important, I think, today, more than ever, especially as we've seen the effects of the pandemic change the labor market so much. It's just really important to build your social capital and have that expanded network, to really prepare yourself for your next move, whatever that may be. Hopefully a pandemic will never hit again in our lifetime, but should something happen and change the labor market again, you'd want to be prepared, right? But how do you get there? I mean, meeting folks at our age, a young professional stage, or even older, it can be a little uncomfortable. It's, different than when you're in high school and college and kind of forming those friendships comes naturally. Networking can be a little bit uncomfortable at our age. And so today, again, we're going to be focusing on how to do that through community service, which is pretty unique. But just keep in mind, as I outlined in my previous experience, that some of these opportunities can often lead to unforeseen employment opportunities and kind of your next step in the future. So again, we're going to be speaking from the lens of community service, but that doesn't mean that it can't turn into an employment opportunity later down the road. Now, I mentioned that I'm not a UNO alum, but both of my parents are UNO alum, class of '82. We were both Goodrich scholars. My dad played baseball at the university. My little brother is an alum. And so I do have very close ties to the university. I have family members that work at the university, cousins that have graduated, et cetera. So very close ties to UNO, even though I'm not an alum. And this is important, and I'll circle back to why it's important in just a minute here. I've also listed out here the current civic engagement opportunities or engagements that I'm involved in at the moment. So as Anthony mentioned, I'm the chair of the Greater Omaha Chamber Young Professionals Council. I'm on the executive committee of the board at the Omaha Home for Boys, and I'm a member of the Goodfellows Committee that's put on by the Omaha World Herald in partnership with the United Way of the Midlands. So the organizations that I'm currently involved in kind of tell the story of community involvement as a networking tool. And, I like to think that I've created this really solid foundation of community service here in Omaha, but I definitely didn't get there alone. And so that's kind of what I'm going to share with you today. So as I mentioned, my dad's a UNO alum. Back when I had just moved to Omaha from college after working in Lincoln for a few years, I was looking to get involved. I was pretty heavily involved in undergrad in Lincoln. And so I wanted to kind of find a home base, find my footing here in Omaha and ways that I could volunteer and give back to my community. Well, at the time, my dad knew somebody that was on the Omaha Home for Boys board, and she put a call out to her network, which included my dad, and asked for recommendations for new board members. So he recommended that I get in touch with her. We sat down and had lunch and just kind of talked about the home and what it entailed. Now, again, I had really no clue about any organizations here in Omaha because I had been gone for about 6 years, and in high school was involved minimally. So I didn't know much about the home, but it was a really good meeting. We talked about the mission and the vision of the home and different ways to get involved. And at that time, we both agreed that I wasn't ready to sit on the board, but there was some committee work that needed to be done. They were looking for some at-large community members, and there just so happened to be an education and scholarship committee that I could sit on. So given my background in higher education, I thought that sounded perfect, and I said yes. So that was kind of how I got my first start in getting involved in the Omaha community. Once involved, I sat on that committee for about 1.5 years, and then moved to a different committee with programming, and then shortly thereafter was asked to be on the board. So it was kind of like a work your way up situation, similar to what most of us have done in the workplace, or if you're a very new alum, maybe what you're just starting out doing. So after that, like I said, I've been on the board for about 1.5 years now. I've been asked to be vice chair next year and then chairperson of the board the year after that. So it has really given me some tremendous leadership opportunities, again, with just one connection there. Now, while I was just starting out doing committee work for the home, I would post on social media about it frequently. And so one of my friends who was on the Omaha Chamber Young Professionals Council reached out and said, hey, I see you're doing some really good work at the home, would you be interested in joining the Young Professionals Council? Again, I really had no clue what the Young Professionals Council was all about. So I did some research. At first glance, I saw the mission and the vision, to attract, develop, and retain young professionals, to make Omaha a thriving place for YPs to work, live, and play. I said, okay, I can get on board with that. I love Omaha. I was born and raised here. But the biggest factor in me applying to be on the Young Professionals Council was I saw a major gap. When I applied to be on the council, there was no Latino representation at all at that time. Now, I'm always of the mindset that any good organization, community, city, state, nonprofit, whatever it may be, should really be reflective of the community that's serving. And so that was all I needed to say. I'm applying. I will be that Latino representation if I can. So I applied and I was accepted. Kind of same thing with the YP Council. I've worked my way up in the ranks, if you will. My first year, I was just a general council member. Second year, I was a committee lead for a talent development committee. And then this year, again, I'm the chair for the entire council. I'm proud to say we have a very, very diverse council now, just 3 short years later. So we do now reflect the Omaha community that we serve. So that's great to see. Now, my first year on the Young Professionals Council, one of my fellow classmates was the development director at College Possible. Now, College Possible was not on my initial list that I showed you a few minutes ago of organizations that I'm currently involved with. And that's because I'm a fairly new mom. So I had to step back from that engagement and just say, I need to take a little break and make some family time. So, but love College Possible, great organization. And again, kind of aligns with what I've done professionally, right? Which is higher education and access and youth development. So she asked me to sit on a committee to help plan their largest fundraising event for the year. And so I did that. I just wanted to include that because it's, again, another good example of just how community service can lead to networking, can lead to your next opportunity. So being on the Young Professionals Council, being the chair, affords me a seat on the chamber board. Now, the chamber board is massive. I think there's about 100, maybe over 100 members of that board. So I've gotten the chance to meet and kind of network with business leaders in the Omaha community that I never would have met, without having that seat on the board. And one of them recommended me to be on the Good Fellows Committee. And so again, that's kind of my latest civic engagement that I'm involved in. So as you can see, one alumni connection for me has turned into 5+ years of community service and leadership opportunities in Omaha. Now, I mentioned that my father was a UNO alum, and that's kind of who I reference as my starting point to gaining social capital here in the Omaha area. So pictured here is my dad. His name's Martinez. He was given the citation award at graduation by the Alumni Association a couple years ago. He's had a very long career in community service through his work as an Omaha police officer and then a U.S. Marshal. He served on the Omaha Public Schools Board. He served on various boards and nonprofits, as he still does while he's enjoying his retirement. And I don't say this all to brag. Now, yes, I'm a very proud daughter, but the reason I say this is because gaining social capital and kind of having that is really a privilege. And I completely acknowledge and understand that. Without his network, I may never have gotten my start in Omaha. And so it's really just something that I like to acknowledge. Social capital really is a privilege, and it kind of depends on our first connections in this world, which are families, right? So your social capital or lack thereof really depends on the zip code you're raised in, whether your parents went to school or not, college, high school, all of that kind of depends on your upbringing. And those are often factors that are not in our control. In fact, the former CEO of LinkedIn named this the network gap. So the network gap refers to the advantage that some folks have over others in accessing opportunity based on where they grew up, went to school, and where they work. LinkedIn really dove into the research surrounding this topic a couple of years ago, and so I want to share some of the data with you today. So having at least one connection at a company makes you 6 times more likely to get a job there. And having a formal referral from that connection makes you 9 times more likely to get that job. So think back to my very first job as an admissions counselor. I had connections and a formal referral, and I truly do believe that helped me, get that opportunity I don't think I would have otherwise. LinkedIn members in a zip code with a median income over $100,000 a year is nearly 3 times more likely, are nearly 3 times more likely to have a stronger network than a member in a lower income zip code. Member at a top school, as ranked by the U.S. News and World Report, is nearly 2 times more likely to have a strong network, and a member who works at a top company, as defined by LinkedIn, is almost 2 times more likely to have a stronger network than somebody who does not work at one of those companies. So it's a very interesting concept, right, of social capital and networking. And I like to use the data because it really does prove and show you that having these, can really give you a leg up. Now, as I've illustrated, and I'm sure all of you can relate in the audience, we all have varying levels of social capital, and our networks vary between sizes and diversity and all of that. But for the context of this presentation, I really want to focus on the UNO Alumni Network, because all of you have that in common. And so that's really a good starting place for everyone, right? Because you've been afforded that, and that's really a great opportunity. So next, I'm going to be discussing networking through community involvement. So I just want to go over a couple of definitions for those of you who might not be as familiar with community involvement as far as boards and committees and councils. So there are different types of boards and committees and different types of organizations that have them, right? Most typically, nonprofits will have boards and committee members that include community members on them. There's also state and city boards. So for example, all of the county election commissions have committees. The city, for example, we could say the mayor, she has a diversity and inclusion council. She also has the mayor's millennial advisory council. So again, just different types of organizations that you can get involved in. When I'm talking about committees, typically committees are less of a time commitment than a board. So if we think back to the original story that I told you about my time with the Omaha Home for Boys, I started on a committee. Typically committees, I would say, meet maybe quarterly, few times a year. Whereas a board member, you're going to be in at least 1 meeting a month, typically more than that. Committees are a great way to learn about an organization and kind of get your feet wet. So if you're just starting out, and maybe you're not sure about if the organization is going to be a good fit for you and vice versa, committee work is a great way to, again, get started. Not much of a time commitment, just good way to learn. Board members are typically asked to donate financially. Again, there is more of a time commitment, and board members oversee the organization as a whole. So there's a little bit more weight put on you when you're a board member, I would say, as far as decision making, and again, kind of that financial donation piece. I will say, don't let that scare you. That's something that kind of worried me as a young professional, because let's be real, I don't have loads of money just sitting around. But a lot of companies will actually support you. So if you tell them, that you're on a board and you need help fundraising, or you're expected to make a financial donation, a lot of companies will help you in doing that and may even match funds. So something to keep in mind. Don't let that scare you away from participating, in a board or on a committee. So what exactly do board and committee members do? Again, they kind of oversee organizational activity. They really represent the community stakeholders that are served. Again, so like I mentioned, Young Professionals Council, we really serve and represent young professionals in Omaha. The Omaha Home for Boys focuses on foster youth, so that's kind of their wheelhouse. So it kind of depends who you're going to be representing, but that's important to know as well. You could be asked to vote on decisions, especially as a board member, and you might be asked to donate, again, your time, talent, or treasure. So like I said earlier, when I worked with College Possible for about a year, I helped plan a fundraiser. So that was more of just donating my time, right? I didn't necessarily have to donate. Even if you do, great, but there's not really that obligation when you're a committee member. And then just be a champion for the organization. So when you're getting involved and when you're serving an organization, your goal is also to get the word out, right? To promote the organization and really just, yeah, be a champion, spread the good news about them. And then you may be asked to volunteer as well. So if there is, some sort of event that they're putting on, or if they need help with anything, you could be asked to volunteer your time. So just keep those in mind, as I'm going through this presentation. And if you have questions, we should have some time at the end. Feel free to drop those in the chat. For the visual learners out there, this is typically what a nonprofit structure looks like. Not always, but it's typically what it looks like. So again, you have the board of directors kind of overseeing those different committees, which oversee the entire organization. The nice thing about these committees, and I'll kind of get into this in a little bit, but there are different areas. Again, these are just examples, but most nonprofits have something similar: fundraising committee, something in finance, something with programming, maybe education. So again, great way to get involved and kind of learn about new concepts and just do good work. So again, we'll touch on that here in just a minute, but I wanted to include this for anyone who's a really visual learner. This is kind of what it looks like. So as you're getting started, really think about what you want to get out of your volunteer experience. Now, this could mean a couple of things. Sometimes your work in the community might align very closely with what you do professionally. That's kind of how mine has gone, right? So I've typically stayed in the education, youth development area. However, sometimes it's nice to fill in gaps that you may see in your professional work. So let me give you an example. I'm sure we have all looked at perhaps a job listing that we may want, and it's asking for 2 years of experience in a field that we do not have any experience in. This can be a great way to fill those gaps. So for example, let's say you're like me, you work in education, but you're really looking to get into, I don't know, the finance world, right? I don't have any experience in finance or budgeting, but through my experience as a board member, I have learned a lot about how nonprofits operate as far as finances go. And I've learned that budgeting piece, which was not easy, by the way, because I'm not a numbers gal. But if I was looking to get into that field, okay, now I have some experience under my belt. And I know as a young professional and students that I talk to, or recent alum, it can be very frustrating when you're looking for your next opportunity and you don't have that experience and you just think, how am I going to get it if no one gives me the chance? Well, this is a great opportunity to get some of that experience. So it could align very closely with what you're currently doing professionally, or it could not. Again, and that could be by design. Maybe you want to learn something new and this is a great chance for you to do that. Once you've kind of thought about what you want out of your experience, I would encourage you to do some research. So there are tons of organizations that you can get involved with, right? I'm going to show you 2 ways to do some research today. So we're going to look at the Share Omaha website and the YP Council Engagement Directory. Now, before I go to the Share Omaha website, I just want to do a quick poll from the audience. Is anyone not located in Omaha? You could just raise your hand or maybe throw it in the chat where you are located. It's totally okay, and it's actually a good thing because it will help with this example here. So if you're not located in Omaha. Or maybe we are all located in Omaha, which is fine too. Either way, okay, let's go ahead. I'm gonna do a new share here. And we are going to look at the Share Omaha website. Okay, is this showing up for everyone, the Share Omaha website? Great. So whether or not you are in Omaha, you can use this website, which is excellent. I think that's one of the benefits that has come out of the pandemic is that a lot of workplaces and community service organizations have found that they can offer remote work to folks or even remote volunteer opportunities, which is, again, kind of unique and something cool that came out of the pandemic. So Share Omaha is one of my favorite websites to use because you can filter. So again, let's say you're starting out and you're just looking to volunteer. So we'll go ahead and click the volunteer tab. Let's hope my internet's not too slow from that storm. Okay, looks like it's going perfect. So once you're in the volunteer section, you can kind of filter for what you want. So as I mentioned, there are varying levels of kind of responsibility within organizations. So let's say you're just starting out, you want to be a committee member. So we're going to filter down even further and look at committee member opportunities. Again, then we can look at location. So we can say, I want to work on site at a nonprofit, I want to work off site, or I want to work from anywhere. So this is where it's nice if you're not from Omaha, you can still kind of have that tie back to UNO and to your Omaha ties and work from anywhere. You can also filter down by who it helps. Maybe you're like high school and college, Rebecca, and you're really interested in helping animals. And so you want to work with animals, you could click that. Or the environment, let's say. And it gives you this really committed list of organizations that are looking for committee members. And as you can see, this is not a small list. And I would bet that there are multiple pages, right? So there are tons of opportunities to get involved here in Omaha. And again, this Share Omaha website is one of my favorites in that you can really just filter down to what you're looking for. So you don't have to waste too much time Googling things. So Share Omaha is a great one. Another one that I really like, can you all see this? The engagement directory. Perfect. So the engagement directory was put together when I was my first year on the YP Council. And essentially what it is, it's a big dump of organizations that the folks on the YP Council at the time had participated in. The reason we put this together was because we wanted to provide opportunities for young professionals in Omaha to see that, you don't have to be afraid to join a board, a committee. I think it is a little daunting, if you were to go into a boardroom and everyone's 30, 40 years older than you. So these are organizations that we know have welcomed YPs and really embraced us. And so, again, it's kind of just a big dump of organizations that you could get involved in as a YP yourself. So something to keep in mind. Now, we use the word YP and young professional, but you really just have to be young at heart. I like to throw that in. You don't necessarily have to be young. I know some people deem young as under 30 or under 40. Young at heart is what we'll go with. So these are really two great websites that you can use to start your research and figure out, what you want to get involved in. Okay. So once you've done your research, the next thing I would encourage you to focus on is your personal brand. Personal brand's important because you're trying to make a name for yourself, right? You're trying to kind of build this reputation and get started in the community service world. And so it's important that your brand really represents the true you. This is something that I've had to work very hard on because for the longest time, I was always introduced as Mark Martinez's daughter, which again, I am very proud to be my dad's daughter, but I'm my own person, right? So I want my own brand to kind of speak for itself. I want people to recognize me as Rebecca Atkins or formerly Rebecca Martinez. So again, personal brand's very important. It should be a combination of things. Think of your beliefs, your values, your interests, skills, and talents. Think about, again, what kind of work you want to do, what do you want out of this experience, and what goals you want to achieve. This takes time and some practice, right? You might have to self-reflect, maybe write down some words, make a word cloud to describe yourself. And then I would also encourage you to audit your family and friends. I think a lot of us have this idea in our heads of what our brand is, but you might not know until you ask other people, what would you say my personal brand is? Or, if you had to write down 3 words that described me, what would they be? That's a really good way to figure out what the perception of you is. And that way, if you don't like it, you have some time to change it, right? And you can work on your branding. So very, very important. And then it's time to take action, right? So you've done your research, you've focused on your branding. Now we're going to take action. So we're going to ask folks in our network to facilitate introductions. We're going to audit your network, right? Think about who and what is missing. Having a diverse network truly does lead to more opportunities. So I would really encourage you to think about that, who and what is missing from your network piece. Of course, diversity means a range of things: race, gender, gender identity, religion, political views, as far as corporate and nonprofit folks. So really think widely when it comes to diversity of your network. And then again, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about the Alumni Network and all the opportunities that can afford you. Really lean into that, especially if you're a young alumni. And again, you could be young at heart, that's fine. But introduce yourself as a young alumni while you can, right? I think you'd be very hard pressed to find an older alumni who would not want to help you out. If you reach out to them and said, I'm a young UNO alumni, I'm trying to get started and get involved in the Omaha community or the Denver community or the Chicago community, wherever you are, could you help me? I think you'd be very hard pressed to find somebody who is not going to want to help you out. So really lean into that and use your alumni network. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to do this. This is one of my favorite features on LinkedIn. And I think it's honestly really underused in my opinion. I tell students about it all the time and they're always shocked that it exists. So if you go to LinkedIn, I'm doing a new, this will be my last share here, one more share. If you go to LinkedIn and you just search for the University of Nebraska at Omaha, you will get to this page. And there's a nice tab here that says alumni. If you click there, it's going to literally give you a list of all the alumni that are on LinkedIn. And so it looks like it's actually gone up since I took that screenshot a while ago. So this is a huge, huge network that you have. And this is just on LinkedIn. Of course, there are so many more, UNO alumni. But the nice thing about this, again, you already have a connection to these folks. You've already determined that you've graduated from UNO. You can even break this down further. You can look at where the UNO alum live, where they work, what they do. So we can tab over here. So what industry are they in? What did they study at UNO? That's one of my favorites because that's a great way to connect as well. And again, this is nice because if you're not necessarily from the Omaha area, you can still use this. So let's say, okay, we moved to Kansas City. So we're going to look at UNO alum who are in Kansas City. Not really interested in specifically where they work, but let's say we want to find somebody who studied the same thing as we did. So we studied computer science. And this gives you a list of folks who went to UNO, who live in the Kansas City area, who studied computer science. Again, that's already 3 ways that you're connected with these people. So you could just reach out and say, again, I'm a young UNO alum. I also studied computer science, and I'm looking to get plugged into the Kansas City community. Again, I think you'd be very hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't want to help you. And I'm sure you could find at least one person on this list that does want to help you. So I would highly, highly encourage you to take advantage of the network that you have just by being a UNO graduate. Okay. All right. Now, once you get an opportunity, and I know you all will, make sure you show up, right? Treat community service opportunities as you would your full-time job. You really want to show up, do the homework, speak up, and ask questions. Now, by homework, I mean there's typically materials that you'll be asked to go over when you're a committee or a board member. So make sure to do that ahead of time. I didn't know this, but the Omaha Home for Boys uses a dashboard and they can actually track who's logged in and who's reviewed the materials, which is a little scary to think about, but kind of nice, right? Because they can see really who's committed to the organization. And so the chair, when he was speaking to me about perhaps being vice chair and then chairperson following that, he said, we've noticed that you log in, you do the homework, you read over the documents. And so that's something that's really important, whether or not there is a dashboard that can check at, the organization that you get involved with. Just make sure to review what you're supposed to. That can help you in other ways too, right? Because it can really empower you to speak up. If you do not know what's going on and you're not sure what the meeting's going to be about, it'd probably be harder for you to speak up in the meeting. Just remember that you have a really unique perspective, no matter what your background. You were asked to be involved in this organization for a reason, and so I'd really encourage you to speak up, especially as you identify as a young person. Our perspective is unique, right? Each generation is raised with, around, I guess, different things. We think about Gen Z, who's had technology in their hands since day one. That wasn't the case for us, right? So we've had to live through different transitions, and that can be really important. And then be sure to ask questions. I know when I first became a board member, I think I got out of my first board meeting and Googled 10 different words because I had no idea what they meant. And so I had to ask a lot of questions. Again, I mentioned the finance and the budgeting was, completely new to me. It was super foreign. And so I had to ask a lot of questions to be able to understand how all of that worked. So you're not expected to know everything, but I would say the more that you ask questions and read and get involved, the better your experience is going to be. And then be sure to pay it forward, right? I really wanted to share this quote with you all by Julia Freeland Fisher. She wrote a book that's called Who You Know, Unlocking Innovations to Expand Student Networks. And she says, chances are, no matter how hard you've worked on your own, there were people in your life who opened new doors, gave personal advice, took bets on you, wrote letters of recommendation, or offered words of encouragement. Networks networks unlock valuable advice, insights, and influence that can either exasperate existing social strata, right? So think back to the social networking concept I gave you, or be powerful levers for equity and opportunity. And it's time to shift to the latter. So this is also an equity piece, right? I told you about social capital and how, a lot of it is what we're born into, a lot of things that we can't control. But once you've established good social capital and once you have that expanded network, be sure to pay it forward. If a young alum reaches out to you, be sure to connect with them, right? Think about in your network who you can connect them with to help them get their start. And really think intentionally about who is not at the table. So typically when you get involved in a board or a committee, you're going to be asked, to nominate others who would be good for these positions. Think about who's not at the table. That's truly equity in action, and that's something that you can do, easily. Now, I am going to shamelessly plug the CBA Scholars Academy. They actually have a mentoring opportunity available, and they're taking applicants right now. So once I'm done presenting, I'll be sure to throw that link in the chat. But this is a perfect chance for you if you're looking to get involved and you're thinking about mentoring a young UNO student. You have the opportunity to do so now. So they're looking for mentors from all different areas of business. It's not a huge time commitment. So again, I'll put that link in the chat when I'm done. And if you're interested, I would say reach out or look it up and see if that opportunity would be good for you. Now, why is this important, right? You may have listened to this entire presentation and said, I could just do the networking via LinkedIn. Why do I have to get involved? Well, it just really affords you a different opportunity, right? You could get the same results. You might have access to the same opportunities just by networking on LinkedIn or staying within your own circle. But research shows that organizations with diverse boards perform better. And just remember, diversity, we're thinking a wide array of factors here. I truly do believe that UNO, and the numbers show it's one of the most diverse universities, probably the most diverse in the state, if not the region. And we really do have some of the most talented young professionals that come out of Omaha. So our city needs you. And again, those who are not located in Omaha, you represent UNO in your communities as well. So we all, again, have that same tie back to the university. And again, it's really important and meaningful, I think, to get involved in and to give back. So keep that in mind. Now, one last thing I want to mention, and then we'll open it up for questions if there are any. Remember that as an alum, you all have access to career services still. So there are 2 career services offices on campus, the Academic and Career Development Center, ACDC for short. They serve the entire UNO population of any majors except for business, really. Business has its own career center, and again, that's where I work. And you have access to help. So if you're, kind of at a junction in your career, or if you want more help with what I've been sharing today, feel free to reach out. It's a free benefit that you have. We can help you with your resume, writing a cover letter. We can help you build up your LinkedIn. So if you're not as familiar, you want help building your profile, job searches, interview prep, personal branding. we can help you with all of those things. So just be sure to remember that, that you do still have access to that as an alum. All right, and I think now we have some time for questions if there are any. And please add me on LinkedIn. I would be happy to be your first connection and kind of start into this community service world.
Rebecca, I'll start off. I've got a question. As the Alumni Association begins to make a greater concentrated efforts to reach out to students and engage them in the Alumni Association, maybe that could be their first step on the community involvement path. But I'm curious if you, in working with students, see any difference in that generation, given the technology that they grew up with that you mentioned, because I am starting to see some stats that indicate they have less face-to-face interaction, which could manifest itself in less community involvement, even with the great efforts that UNO has. Are you seeing any of that, any resistance to community involvement or just sitting down with somebody face-to-face?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, you know, like I said, I think we're kind of at a weird point in that the pandemic has affected things even more so. So made students more reliant on technology. I know in our office, we did all virtual career fairs. And there were some benefits to those and also some drawbacks. But to answer your question, shortly, yes. I mean, we do see students that are a little more resistant to you know, show up to an in-person career fair. Whereas if it's, you know, a Zoom session, it might be a little more comfortable because they don't have to, you know, sit down face to face or shake the hand, that sort of thing. So it is something that we're kind of working on and trying to figure out how we can re-engage students in that, because I think you're right. It could lead to decreased community involvement, which could really be a drawback. So.
And we do have a question from Benjamin Holman, and he asks if he graduated from the College of Arts and Sciences, but wants to create some nonprofits of different types from what he thinks would be the most beneficial to the community. Would he be able to obtain help from the CBA Career Help Center?
Absolutely. Yeah, we would never turn down an alum regardless of major. It's just typically we focus with business students, but right. So that's a great point. If you know, you're making a career change, or maybe like Ben said, focusing on creating a nonprofit, which could be looked at as like entrepreneurship, absolutely come see us.
What's the number one thing that students and maybe alumni might turn to you for help with?
I would say it's usually the resumes, sometimes job search, but typically resume is the most prominent, I would say, that we get asked for help on.
Is there, on that note, is there any current trend with resumes that you're starting to see that are helping folks get noticed with something new that might be formatting or information that's included on there?
Yeah, the biggest thing, it's not super new, I guess, but maybe, you know, within the last 10 years or so, a lot of companies are using what's called applicant tracking systems, ATS for short. And so what that means is all of the applications that they get will be filtered through a software that reviews their resume and gives them a score. And then based on that, if you're in the top, you know, let's say 10% of the resumes, you'll be passed on to the hiring manager. So getting past that software is sometimes half the battle. And so that's something that we work with students on, kind of teaching them rather how to create and format your resume to get past that. A lot of the templates that folks find online or through Microsoft Word don't mesh well with this software. And so you might think you have a really nice, clean resume, but you might get a really low score for some reason. And so that's probably one of the things that we're seeing as far as trends and teaching students how to get past that.
Interesting. I had not heard of that. Of course, I haven't applied for a job in a long while.
Right.
But Benjamin asked a follow-up to that. Maybe you can give one example of a way that you show students how to get past that software.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll actually pull up, let me do a new share here. So we recommend not using a template. We recommend creating your resume from scratch, which is a bit of an ask. I understand that it's you know, a feat. Our office in the College of Business put together this job and internship success guide, which you can find on our website. And we have some sample resumes near the back. I think they start on page 73. Yeah, so make this a little bit bigger. We have some sample resumes here that we put together, and these are business focused resumes. But these are ones that we created from scratch in Microsoft Word. And so that's one of the ways that we recommend getting past those applicant tracking systems. A lot of the templates that students find online have boxes. So they may have the experience section in like a pre-filled box, and those can sometimes trip up those systems and it won't read anything that's in that box. So there's little nuances and tricks like that that we can kind of help with. But yeah, so this guide is available and free online. I can put this in the chat too.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Melissa also asks if the university has any coaching services or service that help people develop their brand, which was something that you mentioned.
Yeah, so we do talk about personal branding quite a bit. We have webinars that we'll put on. There's one more thing I'll put in the chat. And sorry, I hope I'm not overwhelming you all, but the university uses a platform called Handshake now, and that's where employers can post jobs and internship opportunities, but it's also where we promote events that we put on, which are open to alum. So we typically do at least one webinar a year where we discuss personal branding and how to improve that. And Handshake would be where you would find out about those events. So I'll also throw in the link to Handshake, which you all have access to as an alum. You can use that.
Yeah, I want to make sure that the audience knows that ACDC has made that available to alumni. Almost all of their services, really.
Right.
And our surveys indicate, we had a recent survey in January that career development and networking is really the number one thing that they turn to us for help with, that they see us being able to assist them with, and that makes sense. I'll also make a quick plug that if folks go to unoalumni.org, they can register for our alumni directory there, and through that they can make direct contact with alumni as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Matt Nelson asks if you have any advice for us on how we can help close the network gap for our teams and others in our organization beyond just ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's kind of the piece I think of, kind of like paying it forward or reaching back to help others. Make sure that you're just making those introductions for other folks. So if you know somebody who's maybe, let's say, a first generation student who maybe doesn't have the same network that you do, or they're a young alum, first time in the professional world, just make those introductions for other people. I think that's the easiest way. Expand and expose them to your network, right? Because if you think about it, first generation is a good example, because if you have a student whose parents went to college, I'll use my parents as an example, they are more likely to know someone who studied to be a lawyer or a doctor or, in community service, police work, stuff like that. Whereas somebody who's first generation, they're the first in their family to go to college, they may not have access to that same network. So it's really just about, I think, sharing your network and making those introductions, because again, networking can be kind of uncomfortable. But if you have someone who says, if Anthony says, Rebecca, I'd like to introduce you to so-and-so, that makes it a lot more comfortable if you know someone.
And that is something that the Alumni Association is going to start to explore developing more, finding mentors, connecting alumni to alumni, so that we can have this networking grow. And I suppose networking itself is a skill that you have to develop, that you have to work at.
Yep, absolutely. We I don't know if Laura's on the call, my director, but we were at a conference recently, and that was actually something that one of the schools was helping to teach their students how to do, and making those kind of like handoffs and helping them just learn, how do I reach out to a professional? Because again, it's scary, it can be nerve-wracking, especially for students. So yeah, teaching that is on the horizon too.
And I would say that as someone who's not a young alum, but I'm not going to call myself an old alum. No way.
Yeah, hard.
I think a lot of alumni would feel honored and privileged to have somebody reach out to them and say, "Hey, I need your help," and that would be a privilege.
Absolutely. I agree.
Well, Rebecca, I don't see that we have any more questions, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and we're near the end of our hour. Uh, Thank you so much for being with us today. Everything that you shared was great stuff. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was
Yeah.
fun.
I also want to thank all of those who joined us via Zoom. If you came in late or you want to review anything that was said here today, we will post a recording of this webinar to our UNO Alumni YouTube page. We also, now that this is our fourth Young Alumni Professional Series, we're going to be breaking these up into bite-sized segments and sharing those online. So keep an eye out for those so that you can get little quick bits of career advice. We also encourage everyone to join us for our next Young Alumni Professional Series webinar, which is Thursday, July 29th at noon, when Paula Baggiani discusses conflict management and self-awareness in the workplace. So again, that's Thursday, July 29th. With that, thanks again to everyone. Thanks most especially to Rebecca. We loved hearing your expertise. We hope everyone enjoys your afternoon and